Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Karis Circle. Karis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Karis Books, and Karis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are delighted to be here with all of you today to celebrate Sankofa, which is Chibundu Onuzo's newest novel. It is her third novel, the second one she has celebrated with us at Karis. We are delighted. We know she has some Atlanta family, so we hope, we know it's a busy time for everyone, but we hope that we will get to have some Atlanta family in the house at some point. We're joined by Jasmine Guillory, who is the New York Times best-selling author of 6 romance novels. All of our Karis folks know and love Jasmine's work. Some of the more well-known ones are The Wedding Date, The Proposal, and While We Were Dating. Her work has appeared in O, The Oprah Magazine, Cosmopolitan, Bon Appetit, and Time. She currently lives in Oakland, California. So welcome, Jasmine. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you for being here.
And Chibundu was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and lives in London. She is a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature and a regular contributor to The Guardian. She is the winner of the Betty Trask Award and has been shortlisted for the Dylan Thomas Prize, the Commonwealth Book Prize, and the RSL Encore Award. She has also been longlisted for the Desmond Elliott Prize and the Itaslat Literature Prize. I apologize to that person for butchering the name. And Welcome to Lagos was the previous book that she celebrated at Karis with us and was much loved by everyone here in Atlanta. So it is a joy to have you back at Karis. And finally, I want to thank our co-hosts for tonight's event, the Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American Culture and History. Morris Gardner, our librarian, is going to be with us in the chat, dropping resources and helping bring additional context to this conversation. So if you see those resources, just know they will stay up and you can revisit them at any time. You don't have to rush and click all the links. They will stay. And finally, if you would like to ask a question for either of our authors tonight, you may do so by clicking the Ask a Question button at the bottom of your screen. And we'll start to bring those in probably towards the end of the conversation. So thank you both so much for being here. It's a real pleasure. We are big fans of both of your work.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having us. And it is so nice to meet you. I loved your book so much. And I'm really excited to have this conversation. And congratulations on the reception. It's only been a few days, but reception's been wonderful. Congratulations on the Reese pick. I bet you're so thrilled about all of that. When we were in the green room, you were talking a little bit about the differences between US and UK receptions of the book, just in the ways that, you know, Americans can be a little bit more enthusiastic.
Yes.
And
yes.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely had a much quieter start in the UK. It came out in June. You know, it sort of had a nice, sedate release. I got a couple of good reviews. And sort of how the cycle of a book can be. And then sort of like a month after, 6 weeks after, it's like, okay, well, that was that. And then, the American reception has been very different. It's been dynamite. But
first, I just wanted to check in and ask how you're doing. I think it's been a pretty weird and a hard year and a half for so many of us. How are you doing in London? I know it's midnight your time. How has everything been going for you? You know, writing and releasing a book in the midst of this time, I know, is both wonderful and chaotic.
I mean, I didn't write it in pandemic, but I edited it in pandemic. So I already had a draft of it sort of going in. And I mean, so initially things were fine because I went to stay with my family. So I went to live with my sister, and that was good. That was almost sort of feeling like a holiday. But then I think for most of us, you sort of hit that point where it was like, oh, this thing isn't over. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the novelty did wear off a little bit. But I mean, generally, I've been in good health. I did have COVID, but not in any severe way. So, I've been ticking away. It's sort of, it's different. I don't know if you write full time, but writing full time is kind of like living in a lockdown anyway. You don't have any colleagues. You don't have you're at home most of the day. So yeah.
Yes, although I've been thinking how different it is because I do write full time and like I used to like go to coffee shops or meet up with friends. And then, now at least we can do a little bit more of that. But there was a time where I was like, oh, so I'm just going to be in these four walls now.
Yeah, that's fair.
All the time. So
That's
it is
fair.
like it because at first it was like, well, this isn't very different. I mean, I'm home all the time anyway. And then there were lots of small things where I was like, oh no, it's a little different.
Yes.
So I started to talk about the book. One of the things that I found so refreshing about this book was that it is about that Anna, the main character of the book, is in her 40s. And that is like, it's so rare, I think, to have a book with a female main character in her 40s and a Black woman main character in her 40s. And so that was just one of the small things that I really loved about this book at the beginning, is that she is sort of going through a lot, not quite a midlife crisis, but like finding out so many new things and thinking about her life in a different way that I think is often reserved for men in books to deal with, or like younger people to deal with. Can you sort of talk about why you decided to have Anna be the age that she is in the book?
Well, I mean, some of it was logistics. So just looking at the historical data, I wanted it to be set in the present day. So I wanted her to go on her quest in the present day. But then it was like, how old would her father have had to be when he came? So if you're looking at those sort of independence movements in Africa, especially in West Africa, you're talking about the 60s and 70s. So if he came then she'd have to be in her 40s. So literally it was just a like logistics decision. And then when I was writing it, I see in the comments, especially because you are not in your 40s. Yes, I'm not in my 40s yet, but I was in my mid-20s when I started writing it. So she was almost double my age, basically. And I remember deliberately looking for the voices of women in their 40s, 50s, 60s. And it was when I started deliberately looking that I realized that there weren't enough. They weren't in magazines, they weren't on the radio, they weren't on TV. It was sort of like, yes, where do all the older women go? They're not on now they're on Instagram. But maybe like 6-7 years ago, there weren't that many Instagram, all the influencers or sort of. So I had to look at Women's Hour. It's a show in the BBC it's a radio show, and I really, really enjoy it. They just have normal women. So they're not celebrities. So you don't have to be like a Helen Mirren or these are British actresses, a Judi Dench, to go on the show. It's just like a woman going through the menopause. She's the guest for today. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you did sort of that kind of research, because it took me a while and I was reading and thinking, like, when's the last time I read a book about a woman in her 40s? I don't know. Like, I couldn't really think of it because it happens so rarely, I think. And I do think that that's often a like, someone gets to 35 and then we stop talking about them. I love that. And then your answer touched on another question I had, which is, what kind of research did you do for this book? Because there was a lot about, England in the sort of the 70s, and then the stuff about revolutionary Africa. Where did you go to do all that research? Did you, like Anna, go to the...
So I have a PhD on a group called the West African Students Union, which is based in Camden Town from 1925 to 1970. And a lot of the members of that group were very similar to Anna's father. They came over as students. They came to study, but they also had sort of political dreams and ambitions. So all that material is just basically from my historical research. And I joke that, like 5 people have probably read my PhD. So I had to take all those years of research and put it in something that, people who are not like I don't know, professors or whatever would want to read.
So when did you decide, or when did you get the idea, as you know, maybe after, as you did all of this research for your PhD, oh, I'm gonna write a novel about this?
I did it at the same time. So I think I started my PhD at 23 or 24. I can't remember. And I pretty much started the novel. Like, the idea came to me immediately because I had a friend who is the person who the book is dedicated to, Joseph Harker. Now, his father came over as a West African student, had an affair with his mother, and returned to Nigeria. And so I knew a person like this. And then I started doing all this research on West African students for my PhD. And I thought, this is interesting. What about a character like my friend, but a woman? And all this research, all this material, because I knew what the students were talking about, because he wouldn't have had access to that time in his father's life, because very handily, there's a diary in the novel, but sort of in real life, it's just like my father came over as a student, but I don't know very much about him. But then my research helped me to sort of fill in all those gaps, what it would have been like to be a West African student in the 70s, late 60s. Yeah.
And then this is a small question, but how did you come up with the different names in the novel, especially the name of the fictional West African country that her father is from?
Mm-hmm. So again, very closely tied to history. So in the novel, the country is originally called the Diamond Coast, and then it's renamed Bamana after it gets its independence from Britain. So the real life Ghana was originally called the Gold Coast, and generally colonies on the West African coast, a lot of times they were named after the raw materials that European foreign powers extracted from them. Hence, you have Ivory Coast, Gold Coast. There's a slave coast as well. Then sort of slavery ended, and then a little bit of whitewashing, a little bit of scrubbing the records happened. So that that one is not as well remembered. So I named it the Diamond Coast, like the Gold Coast, and then Kwame Nkrumah, who was the first Prime Minister of Ghana, he decided to name Ghana after an ancient West African kingdom, which is not where modern day Ghana is situated. And so I did the same thing. So there is an ancient West African kingdom called Bamana. And so, yes, I just put it as the name of my fictional country.
I love that. So you said that you started writing this novel when you were 23 or 24. Mm-hmm. How long did it take you to write it?
So to get a first draft, maybe like four years. And I think I remember having a burst where I got to about 70 pages. And then I didn't know what happened, or maybe PhD stuff. I actually don't know. And then I remember sort of having another burst, and then maybe from like page 100, writing it to the end. But yeah, it's almost like the novel was in two parts for me. So you have, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say that Anna gets to meet her father in West Africa, because, she finds the diary on like page 2. Yeah. And so from the second page, the novel is being set exactly. Yeah. Yes, exactly. She's going to have to meet him, So the first 100 pages was the journey to meeting him, which was very straightforward. It was almost like a detective story. You find a diary, then you try to find the people in the diary, then you this, that. So those steps were straightforward. And then what I had difficulty doing was when she then finally gets to meet him. It was like, well, now what? So yes, that section in Babana was difficult, was more difficult for me to write.
I was actually thinking that for me, the novel felt like it was kind of in 3 parts, because there was like before she met her father and after, but there's also the diary, which seems like its own separate part of the novel. And I was wondering how did you sort of write the whole thing all the way through? Did you write the pieces of the diary in its own area? Like, how did you figure out how to write that part of the novel? Because it was in such a different voice than in Anna's voice.
Oh, so like the diary entries were like the easiest parts of the novel, because I'd read so many first person narratives from the West African students at the time. So like, it almost felt like I was just like, I could have I don't know how to put it. It didn't feel like I was writing. It just felt most of them are first drafts. So most of them they are in the book as I wrote them, because it was just like I was continuing in a voice that I read letters, I read postcards, I read autobiographies. So I knew that first person West African student voice very well. So yeah, that's how I got the diary voice.
And did you just sort of like write the whole, because I know some people write out of order, some people, kind of write in different ways. Did you write the whole novel the whole way through? Because you said you had the like, oh, now she's met him, what do I do kind of moment. And is that how, were you just like, did you just sort of go to the end and then kind of figure it out again, once you started? Or
No, I definitely wrote it in order. But what changed though was, this was like a very big discussion with my editors, was like the balance between the diary and Anna's voice. And are you getting too much of her father's voice? Are you getting enough of Anna's voice? And actually, so I think it started off more diary heavy. And then what we sort of did, so if you see in the final draft of the novel, diary entries are spread throughout the novel. So you don't just get them lumped at the beginning. So that's sort of kind of how we dealt with that balance between the voices.
Interesting. Yeah, because I did think that especially because then when there's the, like, when you meet her father, you have those different voices too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like present day and then in the past, which I found really fascinating. One other thing that I really loved about this novel was that there's so much about family in it, but like what family means to different people and in different relationships, right? Because there's Anna's relationship with her daughter, with her husband, with her father, and then with her siblings, who, small spoiler, she meets later in the book. And in the way they all kind of talk about family and their relationships, I found so interesting. And I was wondering if some of that is like the difference, because I sort of saw in that some differences between like the way I think different ethnicities can talk about family. And I was wondering if some of that is kind of the difference between, England and Africa, or if it was just a very different kind of way in thinking and talking about family.
I mean, I think Anna's family, or her concept of who the members of her family are, is quite it's small when she's in England. So her family is her mom, her aunt, maybe her grandfather, and her family is her husband. Well, he's kind of cancelled at the beginning of the novel, so maybe not him, but definitely her daughter. So that's what, 4 people, 5 people, and that's it, and then she goes to Bamana, and the concept of family just expands. So you sort of have her half siblings. They say to her over and over again, because she says,
I was just about to say that.
Exactly.
That stuck out to me.
Exactly.
Her half siblings kept saying to her over and over again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So she says, you're my half sibling, and they say, you're just my sibling. We just we don't need the half. Okay.
We don't say like that here. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And I think about that too, because sometimes when I hear people, because in my family there's lots of like half and full siblings, and nobody ever says that. Like sometimes when I hear other people say that, I'm like, well, that's just your brother. That's just your brother. So that was so interesting to me, because I really related to that. Like we don't say that way here. Yeah. I love that kind of expansion of family, but it also seemed a little. It was hard for Anna. It felt like for her to, because it was so not like anything that she'd ever experienced. So I sort of enjoyed seeing her grapple with and kind of be confused by this different concept of family.
I mean, I didn't want to make. It's funny you say it was hard for Anna. I didn't want to make it easy for her, in the sense that I think when I started the novel, I had this sort of vision of like a Kodak moment. So, Anna would arrive in Bamana, and she'd meet her dad, and he'd say, "Welcome home, my daughter," and there'd be a nice celebration and a feast. And I mean, I'm not saying that this couldn't happen, but sort of realistically, if you meet someone, they've lived their whole lives without knowledge of you, and you just turn up and say, "I'm your child." Yeah, I think their first reaction would be like, "Huh?" So I think, yes, I sort of had to drop my Disney-fied version of what might happen and think, actually, realistically, what would happen if a woman who was 48 just showed up to tell you, "Hi, Dad"?
You're like, I do not have it. I know who all of my daughters are.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, I really appreciated kind of the way that everyone was a little conflicted about that, because I feel like that feels very true to life. Right? Like, because I've had family members sort of like meet someone that they found out that they were related to, and everyone, it took a while. Everyone is fine with it, but at the beginning it was like weird.
Yes, exactly.
Let's see, another question. And then another thing that I thought was really interesting was sort of the concept of home in this book, because Anna starts out in London in the house that she was in with her ex-husband, and she doesn't really is sure if she belongs there, and then it's kind of looking for a place that she belongs. And so I really found kind of her search, and I think in some ways I think that she wasn't identifying this as like a search for home or for family, but I loved the way that she kind of very slowly felt more at home in the different places, because she was in so many different places when she finally made it to Mana. And so I just wanted to ask, like, what kind of research did you do into like what kind of homes the African dictator would have, because there were, I think, at least 3 different places that she stayed while she was.
There were actually. Yes, there were. I guess, I'm fascinated by the scenes. So, for example, as a real life, he's dead now. His name was Mobutu, and he built. So this is sort of a need to know. He built a palace for himself in the middle of the jungle called Gbadolise, and so that's why I call the palace in Sankofa Gbadolise. And he built this opulent palace in the middle of nowhere, and it's all gone to ruin now. All gone to ruin. All, and there are many leaders from that generation who did this sort of. They took money meant for hospitals, schools, whatever, and they built these mansions that are now slowly crumbling back. So yes, I guess the research was sort of. When I was reading these essays and articles and sort of finding out about all these sort of mansions and palatial residences, it was more sort of like just curiosity. But then it ended up in the novel, because I was like, yeah, Kofi would definitely have one of those.
Yeah. And that's actually another question. So his name, right? He starts off in his in the notebook. He has one name, and then when he moves back to Africa, he becomes a different name. How did you kind of think about the names that he would start with and change into, and how that would all work in the novel and for him and like sort of his persona?
Again, that was very common with African leaders of that generation. Most of them grew up in sort of westernized colonial sort of settings, their education, all of that. So they would have been given quote unquote Christian names. And again, most of them, part of their political awakening was to go back to their original African names. So Kwame Nkrumah, similarly, Jomo Kenyatta as well. They were all known by different sort of Thomas, James, Peter, etc. And then they sort of had this nationalist awakening. Often they had it abroad, actually, not at home. They had to sort of leave home for their minds to be opened and to actually realize the extent of oppression. So yeah, that was sort of part of, again, just the knowing the research. Yeah.
And then has anyone that you like talked to in the course of that research read this novel, especially the kind of notebook portions and all that portions? Have you heard from any of them about it?
That's really interesting. So most of the people that I interviewed, sadly, if I'd done it 20 years ago, I may have caught some of the like big figures. But by the time I got to interviewing people, most of the like people who become presidents and ambassadors and all those sort of things, most of them had died. So the people I interviewed, no, I haven't sent them a copy of Sankofa, but maybe I should now that you mention it, Jasmine.
And can we talk about the title? When did you decide that the title of the book would be Sankofa? Was it, I think sometimes it happens when you kind of write that portion of the book that the word comes in and you think that is the title, or sort of was it the opposite?
Oh, so I didn't decide. My sister gave me the title. In the second book, she's given me the title from. Apparently, I'm not very good at titles. I refuse, I refuse to agree. But so far, I've only succeeded in naming one of my novels.
Did you have a different title for this book? And then your sister was like, no, absolutely not.
No, it wasn't her. It was my publishers, actually. My publishers in England. They were like, yeah, we just don't think that title is like popping. Like, what do you mean? So we all sort of went back to the drawing board and just had all sorts of ideas. And it's funny, we kept circling around Sankofa, but for some reason we decided to translate Sankofa into English. So it would be like birds flying forward, backward. And then so we were circling around it. And then, my sister said, well, but why don't you just call it Sankofa? Instead of trying to translate it into English, why don't you just call it the word?
And then everyone was like, yes.
Everyone was like, yeah, that makes sense.
So is this your third novel?
Yes, my third novel. Yeah.
And so how was the experience writing this one different than writing your others? Because for me, it feels like each one is a little different. So do you want to talk about that a little bit, about sort of the writing process for this one?
I think each one is different, but what's the same about it? And I found this, that after I finished my first novel, The Spider King's Daughter, I finally believed that I could actually complete a novel, because I think that's the biggest hurdle, actually, to ever completing a project. And so before The Spider King's Daughter, I started and abandoned several projects. So to finally finish one, it was like, okay, wow, I can do this thing. So Welcome to Lagos, again, very different in the third person, large cast of characters. But even and there's always that point in a novel where you're just like, I don't know where the story is going to go now, and it just seems everything has lost momentum. For example, with Sankofa, that point was when she meets her father, and then what? But I think you then trust yourself that, okay, I'll figure it out. I might not figure it out today or tomorrow, but I'll come back and I'll tinker and this, that, and the other. And so, yeah, just that belief that you can do it again, and it's invaluable.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the hardest, once you know that you can do it, then it makes all the difference, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's like, okay, I've done it before, therefore this is not impossible. Yes. But before you get there, it's like, well, but that's impossible.
Yes, so, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said that you edited this book during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. I know that writing and editing during the pandemic has been different. How was that experience for you? You said you were living with your family during at least part of the time.
Yeah, I was with my nieces. That's part of why I moved back to my place, to my house, because especially the youngest, I think she's like 3 at the time. Like 7 a.m. She just fling my door open. Auntie, just crawl on my bed. And I was like, this is not conducive to producing my masterpiece.
I love you very much, child.
I didn't get that much work done when I was in her house. So I was like, right, this is because it's when you're with your family, like every night was movie night. I literally was like being on some sort of holiday thing, and so we were all sort of hold up. Yes. And so I was like, no, I need to go home. So yes, then I went home, and then it was sort of like quiet. There was no 7 a.m. bursting into my room. Yes.
Wake up. And then I'm wondering, I'm guessing the answer to this is no, because of the, like, what do I do now when she meets her father? But do you, or do you usually outline your books, or do you just sort of like kind of start writing?
No, I don't outline, but what I do is like I try to know a few steps ahead. So I don't like to which is why when she got to Bamana, that was quite frustrating, because I was like, I literally don't know what's literally I like to have just enough of the novel in my head that I can wake up, sit down at my desk, and write the next page or write the next chapter. And so yeah, to get to Bamana, and I was like, there's nothing. I don't know what's gonna happen.
Get there, and then
yes. And then I was like, should I bring back Kofi's voice? Because you've had him in the diary. But I was like, no, that doesn't make sense, because we've been first person in Anna all the way. So why are we not suddenly going to be in his head? She's going to find another diary. I was like, no. That's not going to work. We don't need a second diary. So yeah, figuring it out.
It's a hidden drawer in her hotel.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then Anna, I just found to be such an interesting character. Mm-hmm. And you talked a little bit about, kind of why she was the age she was. But how did you get a handle on Anna? Like, when did you decide that she would be in the midst of a divorce and have a kind of grown daughter and kind of all of that stuff that made her in this a little bit of limbo?
Yeah, I still don't think I really have like a handle on Anna. Like, I don't know what that woman is about. like even where the novel ended, for example, I wasn't planning on ending it there. And it was sort of like, she was like, I'm done. Mic drop. I don't generally speak about my characters like this, but sort of her in particular, I just, I think I would definitely find myself right. So, for example, like that bit where she goes to the beach, for example, and she has that sort of experience that she has on the beach. I didn't start off in the beach scene thinking that would happen, but Anna was like, I'm on holiday, yo. Exactly.
I know you wanted me to do at the beach.
Exactly. So yeah, these were. Yeah, I don't really know that I have. I don't know that I have a handle. I had a handle. I found her interesting, and I found her very closed off. And I found her that she didn't want to share. So again, this was a lot of things we discussed, and the editing process, both here and in America, they were great. We sort of just talked a lot about. There's a certain sort of I don't know that is a debt you owe the reader, but there's a certain sort of expectation. Let's say expectation that a reader will have a certain level of access to a character and what a character is thinking and what a character is feeling. But then you have to balance this out with that. I don't think Anna always knows what she's thinking and what she's feeling. And I think actually a lot of the time she doesn't often know what she's feeling. She might know what she's thinking, but not often what she's feeling. There was that sort of balance to still make it seem like it was coming from her voice and her observations. And so sort of even the humor in the book, like what humor there is, it's sort of Anna.
There's a lot of humor. Don't downplay
okay,
it.
Thank you. I'm funny. I'm funny. Well, yeah. Anna is funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so even the humor in the book, for example, it's sort of like sly, because she's not going to come out and point it out. She's just almost sort of going to observe and like sniff, and it's not going to be direct. It's not going to be the most obvious thing. So I think, yeah, that's yeah, she was an interesting character to write.
Yes, well, I found her very fascinating to read about. Partly because I do think that she is a very different kind of character than we normally get in books. I mean, partly because of her age, but also because of the because she was sort of a little closed off, right? She was sort of in this period of her life where she wasn't quite sure what was going to come next, and she wasn't going to really tell you how she felt about that. She wasn't sure, and that's all you need to know.
Exactly. That's all you need to know. Yeah, that's all you need to know. Like, Anna is not going to go on a talk show and sort of tell all that's going on in her life, and no, she's not. She's not interested. No.
So what for you? I mean, you already answered kind of one part of this question, but what was the hardest part about writing this book for you? And then I think you already told us what the easiest part was, the notebook.
Yeah, the diaries.
And then what did you have the most fun with as you were sort of in the process of writing and editing this book?
So I think working out how to get to the ending in a way that felt both like an ending, but like a beginning that's going to happen. You feel like it's both open and shut, which I the internet. It's both like open and shut, which I think the best endings are. Like they both close and seem to open something up. So yeah, sort of figuring out how to do that in a way that the reader feels satisfied, but you also leave them wanting more. That was difficult. So yeah, there were many drafts of endings. My favorite scene to write was when Anna goes to the slave fort as a tourist / pilgrim. And I just think there's the industry, shall I say, that has developed around tourists coming to those sites of historical Black trauma. It's very interesting because some people come as tourists and some people come as pilgrims. And so some people are looking for like a deep spiritual experience, whereas others are like, this is just something to do on a Saturday. And it's that sort of juxtaposition between the side by side that I think is both serious and funny. And I read an account once of someone who went to a former slave trading house that was actually somebody's present day house today. And so you had the horror and the like, put all the clothes under the bed, the tourists are here. And it's just sort of the side by side. And I wanted to capture that in that scene. So I enjoyed writing that.
Yeah, I really love that scene. I think because of the kind of different kinds of people who were there and experiencing the exact same thing very different ways. And like, it felt so familiar to me, having never been to one of those places, but I was like, oh yeah, I could see, the people crying and then the people just like taking the pictures from Instagram and like,
exactly.
All of the, and it did make sense because people are experiencing all of those sites in different ways.
Yeah.
So yes, I really love that scene. I was going to ask you about that. Have you been to any of those sites? Like,
it's funny. I haven't, but I watched a lot. Thank you, YouTube. I watched a lot of videos on YouTube, and I read accounts of people who'd been. And it's funny. I have been to Ghana. I don't know why I didn't go to. So there's a famous one, the Elmina Castle, but I didn't go. And we have some in Nigeria as well. I think Ghana is more conscious of its history when it comes to slavery, whereas in Nigeria we sort of are like, there's some in Badagry, but it's not the same. It's sort of like, yeah, that happened a long time ago, let's not talk about it. But the effects are still being felt till today. Yes.
Let's see. And then sorry, there's an airplane flying overhead. I'm just waiting to get this way. There's the Blue Angels are in San Francisco right now, so that means there's a lot of big military planes flying over my house.
Okay.
next week. Stifle. And then the question I had for you that I love asking other writers is, do you have advice for other writers watching this, either sort of aspiring writers or writers struggling with something, trying to sort of make it to even their first book, or make it to their fourth if you're maybe in the process of that. What is the advice that you have? What kind of got you through the long process of working on and writing this book?
Yeah, I guess nobody sits down and writes a novel. No writers sit down and say, I'm writing a novel. What you do is you write a page, if you're lucky. Let's say 2 pages in a writing session, or 3 pages, if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, you write a few paragraphs. If you're not lucky, you write just one. If you're not, you write a sentence. Sometimes you just move a comma around. But it's the continued sort of the sum of all these little bits of writing. And I have a lot of friends who want to write novels. And I mean, it does work for some people sometimes. And they say, oh, I'm going to go away for 3 weeks and just like lock myself up in a room. And then I'm just going to crank out 70,000 words. I said, yes. Or you could write 1,000 words a week for 70 weeks instead. I mean, that's slightly less drastic. And sort of, again, more doable. So sort of, because when you think of a novel, you think of this long, vast project. But if you just think about it in smaller pieces that add up to a whole, then it seems less daunting. And then you're not thinking, gosh, I have to produce 70,000 words, because you don't. Nobody does that in one sitting. You produce 500 words, 250.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's excellent advice. I think so often you sort of think of the finished book when first there's a period when you write those, 70,000 words, but then you edit them over and over and over and over again. And so I think people often compare those 500 words that they wrote in a day to the finished novel that they read the other day and said, well, but mine are so much worse. Yes, they are. However, those 500 words probably when we first wrote them were not that good anyway.
Yes, and then exactly.
Them. And I think that's the hardest thing to see when you're kind of outside, and sometimes when you're still, when you're inside, when you're writing your, another first draft, when you've already done that, it kind of feels like, but how do I get from here to there? Sometimes it's possible.
Yeah.
And then do you have any book recommendations for us? What are you reading right now?
Well, I always recommend Sefi Atta's novel, Everything Good Will Come. I read it like once a year, and I just love the book. It's about 2 childhood friends. So the novel starts when they're children and just follows them through adolescence, through getting their first jobs, all of that. It's like through their first, one of them has a child. That's sort of friendship through the years, through the decades. I just love that book.
I'm going to jump into the question box. If anybody else has any questions, please feel free to jump in and ask. I love this first question. I love the literary device of the found diary. Did you write the whole diary and then work passages into the book? And do you write your own diaries too? I love that end of the question.
So I stuck the diaries into the narrative. So I didn't, but I think there was a point where, and this is why I had to break them up. There was a point where I almost sort of forgot about Anna. I got absorbed in my diary creation. And then it's like, where's Anna? And then just had to weave Anna in through the diary entries. So yeah, it is sort of the story, because I think the story of how Anna's father met her mother, that was very exciting and romantic, or maybe not romantic. I don't know. It depends. You decide if you think it was romantic. But it was exciting anyway. And so I enjoyed writing that. So it was a mixture of both. Sometimes I would remember that Anna is also a character in this novel, and she has a first-person voice. So we need to hear from her in between this diary entry and this diary entry. And then sometimes I forget and just get caught up in the diary. Do I write a diary? Yes, I do. I do. I kept one since I was like 12 or 13. And I have them. I have every single one. Yes, I yes.
That your answer to that question actually brought up another question for you, which was, did you ever think about kind of swapping the main characters of the book and writing it from the point of view of her father instead of from Anna?
Yes, I did. But you see, the problem is I'm not interested in Kofi after like he's powerful and he becomes a president or a prime minister. And I guess that was my PhD, because I was looking at that very specific time when they were these students with these big dreams. And to be honest, I don't know, even after writing the novel, and because this is one of the questions I was asking myself, how did these idealistic men, and it was mostly men, some women, who wanted to make paradise in Africa, who wanted to, after independence, turn Africa into a land flowing with milk and honey. How did these people end up being so irresponsible? How did they end up being so selfish? How did they end up being so callous? So, like, what happened to that generation? And so I didn't think Kofi would be honest. So because I feel like for that transformation to happen, you have to start lying to yourself. You have to start saying the things that I'm doing are not actually for my benefit. There's, you may see me living this luxurious life, but actually it's for you. It's for you I'm doing this, not actually for me. And I think Kofi as prime minister, as president, I can't imagine what he would write in his diary. I can't imagine that honesty that he has as a 20-something-year-old man. I can't imagine him having that in his 60s and his 70s.
Yeah, and now that you say that, it is very interesting because I feel like in reading the book, you see who he was as a young man, and you see who he is now.
Mm-hmm.
But you only get a little glimpses of who he was during that, when he was the president. And I think that is interesting because I think that's the least interesting part of him, right? Like, particularly in relationship to Anna, like, yes, it's interesting that her father that she discovered was a dictator, but we all know who that person is, right? You all know what a dictator is and what they do. And I feel like the relationships make him much more interesting to read about, kind of in the before and in the after.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the diary portions of it.
Thank you.
And we'd love to hear about your songwriting and how you created this incredible music video with so many people after months of isolation.
So it was my friend who gave me the idea. So I've started singing more at my events here, just because I like singing. I'm a singer. I sing in my church. I play the piano in my church.
Yes, you did mention that at an event you did for another book. For this bookstore, you did some singing.
Yes, I sang with my cousins. Yeah, my family is really musical. We can always find a 3-part harmony. And so he said, why don't you write a song to release with your next novel? And I was like, like, I don't have the time. Because I have songs I've written about, I don't know, relationships or whatever, but they didn't fit with the themes of Sankofa. And so he said, well, since you don't have anything that fits, why don't you write one? And I was like, I don't have the time, it's too stressful. Because my book was actually supposed to come out in the UK in 2020. It was supposed to come out last year. But then the pandemic, and then, everything was shunted. And
then the pandemic is really...
Yes, exactly. So then I did have time to write something. And then it was something, again, the thing with inspiration, it's interesting. I remember when I heard that Chadwick Boseman had died, and I'm sort of watching all the films and all of the videos and tributes that came after he died. Again, all this stuff about like ideas about identity, ancestry, especially with Wakanda and heritage and all of that, those ideas were bubbling in my mind. And then I also listened to Glory, It's the one for Selma, the soundtrack for Selma that John Legend and Common did. And so those two things, Chadwick Boseman's death, listening to that song, I wanted to write a song about heritage, identity, all these sorts of things. And so I just started. In my father's city, there's a green street sign with my father's name on it. And then I just carried on from there. So then I had the song. And then once you have a song, you have to have a music video. I got all my friends and family to be in it, to sort of celebrate Black people doing cool, extraordinary things in the UK, and not just Black people who are more famous. So one of the people featured in the video she's an athlete. She won a gold medal at the Olympics, so she's in the video. But then also, her name is Christine Ohorogu. But then also, I just had my friends who are doctors, who were at the front line of the pandemic, who were part of the people. We used to clap for the NHS every evening. They're not famous. You may never know who they are, but they've done incredible work. We had fun. And it was socially distant. So there's a lot of people in the video, but everybody had their time slot where they'd arrive, and there were no groups bigger than like 3 or 4. So all COVID compliant.
Yes, I think people have been very creative with been filming in the
yes, exactly. Exactly.
And then I think we have time for one last question. And so this is just about you as a historian. Versus writing fiction. Do you prefer fiction to history, or is that a preference? Do you sort of like them both?
I prefer fiction to history. Yeah, I do. But I think of my historical research as the dry goods. I've used this metaphor before. I'm going to use it again. The dried ingredients that you put in food. So I don't know. So think of I'm trying to think. We have them, you will know what they are in American, in Nigerian context. I'm trying to think what herbs that you cook with, maybe
basil, parsley.
Yeah, there we go. Parsley. Okay, let's say parsley. You can't eat parsley on its own. So it's the same thing with most historical research when it's put in an academic fashion. It's quite dry. It's quite difficult to digest. You can't eat it on its own. But then when you add all those ideas into the soup of a novel, then it gives it depth of flavor and layers. So I think there are books that I read reading around my PhD. So even again, some of the more university texts, maybe things like Black Skins, White Mask by Frantz Fanon, all those sort of people, their ideas definitely shaped Sankofa, but not in the direct way where in my PhD I just have quoted, as Fanon said, and then I just do the quote and then move on to the next thing. You sort of add it to the soup of the novel.
Well, that's delightful because I would not call myself a historian, but I was a history major in college, and I've always loved history. But I do agree with you that there's an academic way of writing about history, and then there's a fiction way of writing about history, and I prefer the latter.
Exactly.
I think we're ready for ER to jump back on and close us out. There we go.
Thank you both so much. This was so fun. I love hearing about process and all the different things that go into your novel. I think it's great for folks out in the audience who are aspiring writers, and it's always fun to hear all of the different ways that you bring different talents and forms of creativity into your work. So and we're of course all jealous that you are both incredibly talented singer, incredibly talented fiction writer, and incredibly talented historian. So
yeah,
it's very special. So for folks who do not yet own Sankofa and would like to purchase it, it really does help us when you buy your books from Karis. So if you click on this teal button at the bottom center of the screen, that will take you directly to the link to buy it from us. Some folks asked in the chat if it's out in paperback yet. It is not. It'll probably be 6 to 8 months usually. It is available as an audiobook, I believe, and it is available in your local library. So if it's not yet, just definitely request to your librarian. But I have seen it in the Atlanta library. So just know it is available in lots of different ways. But of course, we love when you get it from us. And Jasmine's books are also very available from Karis and also very available from libraries. So be sure to support her work as well. Thank you, Jasmine, for being our moderator tonight. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and I hope that you both stay safe and well as this pandemic goes on, and then eventually maybe we can all gather again together in person.
Yes, thank you.
Take care, and thank you to Auburn Avenue Research Library and Morris Gardner for all of the resources in the chat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, guys.